took her place. And then the online course, and then although we have to talk about it, like the ERIC notebook, which is still going strong when we worked with it on the VA. So we just updated those for the department, or I mean for the MOOC that we did.
I actually had a request for ERIC notebook that I need to ask you about from somebody at the VA.
Yeah. Well, we got a new version of it too. So.
One of the exercises that you and I worked on, we had a lot of fun, was in I think about 1993, or the big cryptosporidium epidemic in Milwaukee that about almost 500,000 people got sick from the water supply. The reason the water supply got a lot of cryptosporidium in it is that they changed the filtration system in the water treatment plant in order to reduce the amount of, I think it was whatever, lead or something that was getting into the water from the treatment. They changed the treatment system. And the treatment system happened not to be as effective as it should be.
Yeah.
And so there were upstream cattle who were releasing the cryptosporidium organism, and it fed into Lake Michigan, and Milwaukee draws its water supply from Lake Michigan downstream of where this water was pouring in from the Milwaukee River. And so the community just drank cryptosporidium, and it was a huge epidemic.
Yeah.
500,000, I think, people.
And there was that was right around the time of AIDS, HIV, and there was, a ton of immunocompromised people.
So we got a lot of publications about the cryptosporidium. We got journal articles about it. I remember one of the funny articles was a letter to the editor from a guy who lived just outside of Milwaukee, and his wife was complaining about their well water. So he decided he would get water from the Milwaukee tap.
Yeah.
And he brought the water home. And he said, after that, she doesn't complain about the well water anymore.
That kind of is like almost the rich woman who moved out of a Broad Street area, and her husband went and got the water because she liked the taste of it and brought it back to her.
Yeah.
And they all got cholera. So, well, I think, Carl, there's like a lot of questions that I never asked you when we were doing stuff, because when you're doing stuff, I should say, when you're in the middle of doing all this, you're just you're just doing
trying to keep up.
Trying to keep up,
right.
Trying to learn new things, trying to do all this stuff. And, I don't think I ever asked you, well, a little bit of background here. Carl took the EPID 160 course, a traditional lecture course, and now we have this whole thing about flipping the classroom, but I think you went beyond flipping the classroom, which is, taking a lecture and then making little small groups within the lecture, and just taking the lecture away completely and doing all case-based, problem-based learning.
Right.
And I really, what prompted you to take a big lecture course that doesn't have the best reputation in the world and do that and change it so drastically?
Well, I mentioned that one time I was giving a lecture in the School of Medicine on epidemiology, and medical students are notorious for not attending lectures that they don't consider to be mainstream clinical medicine. So these students were sitting in the back of the room, a bunch of them sitting in the back of the room, and they were just opening papers and reading newspapers while I was lecturing. And I thought to myself, they're not getting anything out of this, and maybe the others are not getting very much out of it either. There must be a way to engage students so that they have to actively participate and not passively. And so not passively sit there and maybe become distracted. So I went over to the Center for Teaching and Learning and started asking them about different ways of presenting material other than lecturing. And they're the ones that stimulated me to think about active learning, how active learning can be done. So that's why I started thinking about it, because lectures are good if the person is really, really engaging, really, really capable of some being entertaining to a degree.
Right.
And I was not entertaining.
Well, I mean, but even if somebody...
Not many people are.
Yeah, but even if somebody is entertaining, there's only so much you can, like, absorb at a time anyways. So, you know, I didn't come in right in on this. I think I probably, the course had been going maybe at least 2 semesters before.
Well, 1 year.
1 year, yeah.
What year, do you remember the year that you started?
I started, it turned out I had a gap in, I was a postdoc, I had a gap in part of my funding, and you had a gap in needing a teaching assistant, and so I actually was a teaching assistant, for better or worse, in the spring of 1994.
Okay.
And then I think then you needed somebody to do coordination. And I said, well, boy, I really think I can do this. And so in the fall of '94 is when I started doing coordinating the course, all the TAs, because we had a lot of TAs, and also the adjunct faculty that we used in the course.
Yeah.
So.
Was that also when you started with your web work for the course? That was later.
That was later. But I never really asked, you know, how did the students initially respond when you first started with that kind of new format? Because I don't think they'd ever had anything like that.
A lot of the students at that time, the first semester, were from health, behavior, and education. I remember that. And they were quite enthusiastic about the small group participation. And I think they carried along the rest of the class in their enthusiasm. And I did talk to the students about why it is beneficial to have active participation rather than sitting. I was saying, well, you know, if you want to learn how to word process on a computer, you don't have somebody lecture you about word processing. You have to actually sit there and do it.
That's a really good example.
And learn by doing. And I said, we learn by doing, not by listening. And so I kept pushing that philosophy to them, and they bought it. So it was fortunate that the students were open to that. Some students objected to not having lectures. They were used to, you know, all classes are done by lectures, and if the teacher isn't there lecturing, what good is having a teacher? So you still run against that to some degree. So
I do remember that, you know, we did talk about some of these things, and just I think this is a really interesting phenomena that happened. So I remember students would come in semi-hostile to the fact of that you're not going to lecture.
Yeah.
And then I know you told me that you got approached after the course had ended, and maybe they had gone out and done something different, and they had come back to you and told you about what they did learn. And do you remember any of those?
The thing I remember better from students is that, yeah, some of the students went on to actually start teaching, particularly at Duke, and they used the exercises that we had developed together, and they found them to be very, very successful. So that's the kind of feedback that I remember getting, that other students became teachers and were using the system.
I think I'm thinking about people who actually realize the benefit of how the journal article case-based learning had actually, I think, they had gone out and were able to apply that in what they had done, although at the time they had no idea, that was going to happen.
I think, as you say, some of them really began to appreciate that learning is not passive. Learning has to be active. I kept saying, people, when a baby learns to walk, it doesn't stand up and walk. It falls down a lot, and it has to experience that falling in order to know how to stay in an upright position. You can't lecture them on how to walk. They have to experience it.
Yeah.
That's what I think learning is all about. It really is an active process. And we, as teachers, just need to encourage that active participation on their part. We have to set an environment up where they can be actively participating in their own learning.
I was also thinking, what was some of your favorite, out of all the different activities that we did for Epid 160, what do you think was your favorite one that you felt people really got something out of? And
yeah, we had some exercises where they had to actually perform a study. I remember one of the studies was on bicycle helmets, and so we had the students select a sample of students to survey. They had to develop the questionnaires for the survey. They had to select the people to administer the questionnaire to, and then they had to analyze, they had to organize the data and analyze it and then make a report on it. And I think that kind of thing was very stimulating to the students. It involved them entirely. And the only limitation was that it takes a lot of time to carry out a study. But I would like to have had many more of those kinds of things.
Yeah.
We had one year we had swimming pools, whether there are fences around swimming pools. Another one was bicycle helmets. I don't remember.
The swimming pool one was the first one, which was, I don't think, as successful because there wasn't that many swimming pools around here.
Right.
And the bicycle helmet one, I think, was a good one. And I still think of that every time I see students running around campus riding their bikes without bicycle helmets on. And the last one, I believe, was they closed the recreation center and the student recreation center for repairs. And I think it was about how do you exercise when that's been closed. Yeah. I do think that one was a really great package because they actually went from beginning to thinking about the questions to actually, we remember we even had them get interviewed by the Daily Tar Heel. They did poster presentations.
That's right.
And then the Daily Tar Heel came and interviewed selected students. So they kind of went the whole gamut. I think that was my favorite one too, but I agree with you, it was a lot of work.
So I'm remembering that when you were chair, you tried to get all the faculty to get into active learning and go down to the Center for Teaching and Learning. And so, how did that go over? How successful was that? Did you?
I have no idea, really, how successful it was. Yeah, I had the Center for Teaching and Learning come over and talk about active learning. I think some faculty just are, even when they lecture, they're good at engaging students in question and answer. And that's active learning. Smaller classes you can do that with. The challenge is when you have a class of 100 to 200, how can you engage them with a lecture? Usually the people who ask questions in a large group like that are always the select few who don't care about whether they're looking stupid or not. And there are some who are intimidated and will never ask questions in a large group. So you can't do it in a large groups. So the only way I found is to break people up into small groups. Small groups being 8 to 12, and I thought that was a good size.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is, in the small groups, we had people take some responsibilities for different functions. Like one would be and 1 week would be the leader of discussion, another one would be a recorder.
And you used to have meetings with representatives from all the groups, didn't you?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
I've never heard of any other class doing that. How did that work?
It was sort of, it worked good sometimes, and sometimes it was a complaining session.
Yeah.
But they knew they were being heard, so. I had forgotten that. So.
At that time, we had available quite a few teaching assistants, so that a teaching assistant would have maybe 2 groups of, say, 8 to 10 students that they could monitor. Now that we can't do that.
No, it's 1 to 40 now.
40 students per teaching assistant. So the teaching assistants are supposed to look at the work being done constantly online, the responses to the questions that the case study is raising.
So, I don't know if you want to talk about the online course at all. Carl talked about it a little bit before.
Yeah, I mean, I had some, I just, I'm curious about some things that I guess, like I said, in the thinking back about all the stuff, sometimes I cleaned out, I had to move my office, so I had to clean out some things, and I found stuff, and I'm like, wow, I just can't even remember, you don't remember this stuff, and then you think about it. And do you remember how many different modalities we delivered EPID 160 in?
Well, we had that experience in the Mays Center where we were actually on camera, and the people in 3 or 4 different sites around the state were hearing us, and then they could ask questions, and we could respond, so there was interaction. But they had to meet at the same time. That was the limitation of it.
Right.
Whereas in the online web course, they can go anytime they want. But yes, we tried that modality, I remember.
I think we tried the airplane modality too.
Yes.
That was before.
Yes, that was before. We took that over from Bird.
Bird.
Yeah.
We would fly down somewhere near Charlotte, as I recall. But we're still using essentially the journal articles with case studies, but we were there on site and having discussions live with them at the time.
And I do remember.
And these were mostly adult
it was executive
people.
masters.
Yeah, they were working, and this was extra work for them.
Yeah.
But they were good participants.
Yeah, I mean, I can think of reasons why we went to the distance learning modality we did, and one of them is because I hate to fly, and to fly in a thing that's about the size of an automobile was scary. And we also had TAs who got sick and had to have airbags, whatever those are called. So, but do you remember what you thought when you were first approached about not just doing the distance learning with the airplane or in the Mays Center, but when they said, let's put your course totally online on the internet? And who was that who approached you, and what did you think?
I think what really stimulated us to think about online was the fact that these executive master's programs were proliferating. There was one in Charlotte, there was one somewhere out east, and Others departments were thinking about executive master's program. They all had to have Epi 1, basic epidemiology. You know, we had to have some way where we weren't sending faculty off to all these different spots to conduct a course. And online learning was just coming in at the time, and it just seemed like the right thing to do to solve, to meet a necessity that the department had to deliver these courses, had to have a way of doing it without overwhelming our manpower.
I mean, we could have done that, I guess, through the Mays Center and that way, but what, you know, but why do it the other way, which to me, I guess, has less of that classroom.
When you said the other way,
the internet-based, totally internet-based, no video conferencing. Sorry.
Well, the major disadvantage of the Mays Center is that people had to all be there at that same time. You know, if they're on the eastern or western part of North Carolina, we had to have it at the same time. And you know, if every department was doing it with the Mays Center, there wasn't enough time in the Mays Center to be able to handle it all. So I think we saw the distinct advantage of online web-based courses, that people could do it at any time. And that was particularly good for executive master's programs where people were working 40 hours or more a week, and they couldn't necessarily be available some evenings to do the work. So that was ideal. They could do it at their time it was convenient for them. Take the course, work the problems, get feedback.
Well, one thing I don't think I ever said this to you at the time, but I always was amazed. You were very close to getting to retirement. You retired in, what, 2001, I believe?
2001.
And we started in 1998.
Well, it really was earlier,
97 maybe?
Yeah.
Where were you
even
started?
before that, with Lorraine Baker, I thought it was more like 19.
Oh, that was the redesign of the course.
Redesign.
But
Oh, you mean
taking the
online
course online, and you know, a lot of people would have said, well, I don't want to learn anything new. This is a lot of stuff to learn, a lot of things to think about. And I really always admired you, that you just took it in stride, and we're going to do online. Here's what we're going to, you know, let's do it. And did you have any reservations about it?
No, I did not have reservations. It was a challenge, and the reason I didn't have reservations, I knew I didn't have to do all the technical part of it.
Well, you had to kind of understand it, though, in order to say, how can I take this type of course and translate it to online?
It actually was an evolution from what we were doing before, with the small group discussions on campus. It was much easier to evolve into online small group or individual even work. If we had just lectures all the time, it would have been much more a thing, or, oh, well, we have to use the Mays Center. That's the only way I can give lectures. They have to be, you know, on camera altogether, virtually all together at least.
I mean,
so it was an evolution.
And I think that actually that's a really good point, and it kind of evolved, taking that model that you had developed for the regular residential course and moving it over to the online course. I don't think was that much of a stretch.
It wasn't. It was not much of a stretch.
But I do think that, and I don't know if you know this, but that model is kind of the model for all the distance learning courses in the school, and kind of set the way. So
Yeah, P160 was the pioneer there.
Yeah.
Definitely.
It was a pioneer, and I think, you know, yeah. I'm trying to think what else.
Well, while you're
We're gonna
thinking,
edit some of this, sorry.
while you're thinking, Carl, could you say anything about what you've been doing since retirement? Because I know you've
Yeah,
you've
that would
been
be good.
really active in a variety of areas, and you donate land and everything.
Well, one thing I say about, people ask you, what do you do in retirement? What are you doing in your retirement? And I say to them, well, you know what you like to do on weekends? That's what I do all week long. No, and the other thing about retirement is that they say, are you fully retired? They say, well, you're fully retired when you're 6 feet under. So, yeah, I have been doing various things. Right now I'm doing, I'm involved in a program called Volunteer Income Tax Assistance, where we actually do taxes for people. We file their taxes for persons who are moderate to low income. And it's, we do it free for them. And it's a program run nationwide, but it's, in here it's sponsored by the Department of Aging of Orange County. So I've had to learn tax law. And I've had to learn the software to file their taxes. But it's very interesting to do that because you're dealing with people whose incomes are, I would say, barely survivable.
And they have to file taxes?
They have to file taxes.
That's frightening.
Sometimes they don't need to file, but they don't know that. But most of them do have to file, even though they're making $20,000 or $30,000 a year total. So we have to learn all about, well, exemptions and what they can deduct and what they're not allowed to deduct. And this year is a real challenge because everyone has to have health insurance for every month of the year in the 2014. And if they don't have health insurance, they either have to be exempt because of their low income or unaffordability, or if they don't have health insurance and they have a certain income level, they have to pay a penalty.
The Affordable Care Act.
The Affordable Care Act. So not only do we have to do that, but we have to teach them about why they have to have health insurance and what are the possibilities for them getting health insurance.
Wow.
So that's kind of stimulating. You know, you learn new things. You know. I learned a whole lot about the Affordable Care Act that I did not know before because I have to know why these people either don't get a penalty or why they're exempt or why they might have to pay a penalty. The other thing I've been doing is once a week I volunteer at the Northfield Botanical Garden, just helping out with the garden maintenance, you know, doing weeding, mulching, and it's a nice environment to work in because it's beautiful. You know, nice to work in a garden in a place where there's beautiful flowers, and nice aromas, and nice people to work with.
Didn't you become a master gardener to do that?
Well, I did. I went through the Master Gardener program, and we were working with the county extension office to help giving advice on gardening to people who would call in, or we would have a stand at the farmers market where we would give out literature on gardening. So that was another way of getting contact with people in an educational way. And then I was working with Habitat for Humanity. I was actually working with a crew of 6 of us who were installing the electrical systems in the homes. We had a volunteer licensed electrician who was working with us, who was really supervising us or for whom we were working. And he taught us everything about installing electrical systems in the house. And it was nice to work with a crew. We'd come in for like about 3 days when the frame of the house was up, but no drywall or anything was on. We put all the wiring in and all of the components, and then once they got the walls up and painted, then we would come and put in the fixtures, you know, the receptacles,
Mm-hmm.
the lighting,
Wow.
the plugs. So that was just another way of learning something new, which is, I think we all want to do that. We all want to. You don't want to stop learning at any point, you know, or you don't want to stop hearing new information. If there's any point where you say, I don't want to learn anymore, you're one step away from being dead, at least mentally dead. So.
And you live out in the country, don't you, on a big land farm?
You know, we live on 45 acres.
Do you farm it?
And no, I have a neighbor who is a dairy farmer, and he grows dairy food on our land. Sometimes corn, sometimes just hay.
Mm-hmm.
But that's kind of an interesting experience. And he's a really fine person, and sometimes I try to get him to farm organically, you know. Instead of applying fertilizer, I said, why don't you apply, you know, your organic stuff? But I haven't convinced him entirely yet. Yeah, we put our 45 acres into a conservation easement, so it will not be further. We can have 2 residential places on the 45 acres and no more. And that conservation easement is forever, you know, so we'll never be able to develop. The purpose of conservation easement is to preserve open land, you know, not have wall-to-wall homes through the whole county. Anyway.
So you're still taking care of the community, as you have for all these years.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you want to say? I think we've probably taken more of Carl's time than it was fair to ask you.
No, those are just some of
Oh, it's wonderful to be able
questions.
to talk about the older times and to participate in the history of the department. I'm so glad you're doing this, because so many places, you know, they move on, and nobody thinks to look back at where did we come from and how did we evolve, and it'll be a wonderful legacy for us to have that history.
It really will be, and I really wish I'd started it decades earlier.
I mean, because really, Carl, what you did is kind of prompted, I mean, now we have, in the department, we have 4 online courses.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
in Epi, we have, you know, doing all sorts of innovative things that kind of started from that
Yeah,
very
you have-
first
you have
course.
field epidemiology.
The field
online,
epidemiology
basic
online.
epidemiology, and then
Public health surveillance,
uh-huh.
and infectious disease epidemiology
yes.
methods.
And Lorraine and Karin are teaching Epi, now it's called 600, but it was Epi 160 in your model of small
Yeah.
groups and doing a study.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're doing
as
a
part of the course?
cross-sectional study. We actually revived, I wouldn't say revived, but we brought back some of the different ones, and one is the cross-sectional the study where they do that now. But now, if you remember, at the time, I was, you know, copying pages out of the phone book,
Oh, yeah,
student
yeah,
phone
yeah,
book
yeah.
directory to give to people. Now they're posting questions and things on Facebook.
Oh, yeah.
So it's new generation of, you know,
How you contact people.
how you contact
How you
people
communicate.
and new questions that they have. But yeah, and we I think we're studying the hantavirus 1 that had
The 4 corners.
the 4
Yeah,
corners, and we actually
It'd be nice if you could do something with Ebola.
well, actually, we this summer in the infectious disease epidemiology online course, the person who is the faculty for that, who is actually, she's going to be defending Britannia.
Oh, Britannia Lopez.
She's been teaching it she was a TA first, and then she's been just teaching it as the instructor. And she's going to try to develop some, she's been collecting things on Ebola, and we talk about maybe doing some kind of role-playing things. And the infectious disease epidemiology course really looks at methods and not just a disease a week, and it uses diseases to illustrate the methods. So she's been thinking about the Ebola.
Yeah. The nice thing about Ebola is that it's not a disease where you use medicines to prevent the epidemic. It's, you know, good hygiene and good ways to treat people who have the infection and how you avoid contamination. Basic public health things.
Yeah, so it does fit well, and there's there's a section on transmission dynamics and just all sorts of things, and so she's thinking about.
Yeah, that will be a very valuable exercise. It'd be nice to get something good out of an epidemic like that. Columbia University actually has done some very interesting things with that too. I'll share it with you if you want later.
What?
Columbia University.
Columbia University.
Yeah, with engineering students to come up with engineering solutions. Because like these hazmat suits and everything, there are all sorts of engineering issues with them. I need to mention also that this is Friday, February the 13th, 2015, because I forgot to say that in the beginning of the recording. 2015, February the 13th.
Yeah.
All right, let me shut this down.